Karoline Leavitt is asked by a reporter about some of the breaking news, first reported by a news organization called Notice, that the Trump regime's MAHA report, Make America Healthy Again report.
A Notice investigation found that the Hallmark MAHA Commission report that was released last week cites studies that appear to not exist. We know that because in part we reached out to some of the listed authors who said that they didn't write the studies.
We have complete confidence in Secretary Kennedy and his team at HHS. I understand there were some formatting issues with the MAHA report that are being addressed, and the report will be updated, but it does not negate the substance of the report.
The White House press briefing fell apart the moment Karoline Leavitt yelled, "Press out." Why were reporters abruptly rushed out? From legal battles over tariffs to bizarre answers about budget deficits and Musk's resignation, this presser was a complete circus. And the ending? That's the real kicker. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. It all started with Karoline Leavitt shouting, "Press out," in a tone that could make even the most seasoned journalist panic. Reporters froze for a moment, unsure if this was an actual emergency or just another dramatic twist in what was already shaping up to be a circus of a press briefing.
A disastrous press conference just unfolded in the White House. Donald Trump's chief propagandist, Karoline Leavitt, seemed out of breath. She seemed fatigued, and she was really struggling to answer these questions. Here, she laughs at the concept. Watch this.
So the courts are basically telling you guys they think that the White House's policies, the president's policies, are in some way against the law.
Well, these laws have already been granted to the president by the Constitution and by laws that have been previously passed. I'll give you another example. For instance, we've been blocked in court for the revocation of visas.
Then chaos took over. Journalists scrambled, bags were grabbed, cameras were hastily unplugged, and a wave of confusion swept through the room like a ripple of pure adrenaline. The suddenness of it all. It was something out of a political thriller gone weird. But make no mistake, the tension in the room had been bubbling long before those two thunderous words were shouted. This particular press conference was already walking a fine line between barely managed control and outright disaster. Tensions hung in the air as tightly as they had in previous weeks when questions about false data, awkward economic policies, and that notorious resignation, we're getting to that, dominated the headlines.
This is the most incompetent and corrupt regime imaginable. I guess fortunately their incompetence exceeds the corruption, but they're basically both very, very bad.
The president says he's not happy with all aspects of it. What changes would he like to see be made? And can this bill be both big and beautiful?
It is a one big, beautiful bill, as the name rings true. The president's ultimate priority is to get this bill back to his desk for signature. And the president's priorities in this bill are non-negotiable in terms of the tax priorities he wants to see and the large tax cuts in the border investments that are currently in this bill.
Karoline Leavitt already looked like she was bracing herself for impact before she even stepped up to the podium. Reporters weren't exactly sharpening their knives, but let's just say no one in that room was there expecting a love fest. Of course, no one could have expected the tone to spiral so drastically into absolute turmoil, but that's exactly what happened. Midway through the press briefing, out of nowhere, a sudden medical emergency involving Dr. Mehmet Oz's child sent shockwaves rippling through the room. The details were scarce. He hadn't been seen in the briefing room himself, but whispers from one side of the press pool mentioned his unexpected appearance earlier in the day. And suddenly, everything snapped. The room that had been tense with aggressive questioning just moments earlier turned into something completely different. Unfiltered chaos. Reporters were yelling to each other, shuffling through the crowd, trying to piece together what was going on while security ushered people out almost mechanically.
I wanted to just clarify once and for all the Qatari jet, the sale, or the gift, because the Qatari government is asking the U.S. to clarify that the jet's pending transfer was initiated by the Trump administration. So is this something that the White House is going to do?
Karoline Leavitt to clarify. So what's up with this Qatari jet? Is it a gift? Is it a purchase? How do you describe it?
The amount of questions we've received, and we've been incredibly clear, and I have answered this, the president has answered this, the Department of Defense has answered this. This is a government-to-government gift transfer from the Qataris.
"Press out!" Leavitt bellowed again, though this time her voice cracked as if even she couldn't totally grasp the sheer absurdity unfolding around her. And here's the kicker. No explanation followed, not a word. The White House staff clammed up tighter than ever, fueling speculation rather than easing it. Was the emergency legitimate? Was it connected to any political figure? The complete radio silence rang louder than anything Leavitt could have said, and as reporters meticulously packed up their equipment as confused as ever, it became glaringly clear. This wasn't just one disastrous moment, but a microcosm of what many have come to associate with this administration. A web of crisis layered on top of crisis, all tangled together in one baffling mess. The room had transformed into an almost surreal scene. Some reporters managed to keep their professional demeanor intact, while others were clearly shaken, and a growing feeling of unease made it difficult to tell whether people should be running towards something or running away. You could overhear murmurs. "Is this staged?" one journalist muttered, while another nervously snarked, "Another day, another disaster." It was as if no one had a roadmap for what was supposed to happen next. And for the White House, that confusion extended far beyond just that single press room. This moment didn't just underline the chaos of the situation, it screamed it when Leavitt reappeared several minutes later. As pale and thrown off as anyone else in the room, there were no answers offered. It wasn't the first time the administration had been accused of mismanaging an unexpected event, but the lack of transparency in this moment had an almost poetic vibe. The White House was simultaneously commanding the press to leave the room while leaving them with no clarity on anything important. It was, in a word, messy. And it's not just us saying this. For many observers watching this all unfold in real time, it reflected an ongoing image problem for the White House. Even before this moment, critics and commentators had blasted the administration for its fumbling responses to a range of issues, from Elon Musk's abrupt resignation to the looming trade tariffs we'll dive into shortly. What happened in the briefing room felt like a perfect metaphor. A government scrambling to keep things together while, at times, looking like they're barely treading water. The medical disruption also added a strange tension to the whole situation. Sure, reporters are used to covering a breaking story. They thrive on unexpected twists, but this wasn't thrilling. It was just bizarre. And yet, even in the midst of this chaos, the questions hadn't gone away. The room might have emptied, but the issues that were swirling right before Leavitt scrambled to call it off, oh, they were waiting. Like storm clouds about to break open, the confrontation would reconvene with even sharper angles just moments later. Now, you might think Karoline Leavitt would come back ready to control the narrative, to regroup, refocus, and redirect. But what followed after the room settled back down? Well, the answers she tried to provide were about as stable as the situation itself. Let's just say that when it was time to address tough questions about fabricated reports, she didn't exactly stick the landing. Stick around, and we'll walk through the moment where everything unraveled even further. And yes, someone actually tried to blame a formatting error for all of it. The MA report was supposed to be a shining moment for the administration, a detailed showcase of its groundbreaking achievements in public health. What it turned into, however, was a public dissection of a document so flimsy you'd think it was built out of tissue paper. The report claimed to feature hard-hitting data and cutting-edge research from top scientists, but a little digging revealed something absolutely wild. Several of its citations were completely fabricated. That's right, fake studies, non-existent experts, even some overly polished language that made it sound like ChatGPT had been moonlighting as a government statistician. Naturally, reporters at the presser weren't about to let this one slide. The room was already buzzing with skepticism, and Leavitt didn't bother hiding her irritation, as one journalist asked point blank about the false citations. Their question wasn't subtle. They wanted answers about how a report like this even made it past a proofread, let alone represented the administration's proudest health accomplishments. Instead of an explanation with substance, Leavitt went straight into damage control mode, calling the citation errors formatting issues. Formatting issues? This isn't forgetting to bold a headline or putting a period in the wrong font size. We're talking about citing scientists who aren't real people. But even as the questions kept coming, Leavitt doubled down with a straight face, defending Secretary Kennedy and the Department of Health and Human Services. "We have complete confidence in Secretary Kennedy and his team," she said, words that seemed more and more fragile as the presser dragged on. Her tone had all the energy of someone trying to pretend they hadn't been caught sneaking cookies out of the jar. It didn't exactly inspire faith, and it certainly didn't silence the barrage of follow-up questions from the press pool. Leavitt, visibly exhausted, made a half-hearted attempt to steer the narrative, insisting that the MA report was one of the most transformative health reports that has ever been released by the federal government. That's confidence, sure, but at what cost? By the time another reporter asked if AI had been used to generate portions of the report, Leavitt was in full avoid and deflect mode. "I can't speak to that," she said, shrugging and passing the buck to the Department of Health and Human Services. For anyone watching, it reeked of evasion. Either she didn't know, or she really didn't want everyone knowing, but neither scenario was exactly flattering for the White House. The conversation around the MA report didn't stop there, though. It kept pulling apart bigger questions about transparency, or in this case, the complete lack of it. If something as basic as a public health document couldn't be trusted to get its sources right, what else had been formatted poorly? The press wasn't asking these questions just for fun. Connections were being drawn to a much broader narrative about an administration that seemed more interested in marketing itself than in actually providing trustworthy information. A fake study here, an overblown success story there. It started to feel like a pattern rather than a one-off mistake. Elon Musk's departure from the administration was the cherry on top of an already booming news cycle. When asked about it during the press conference, Karoline Leavitt's attempt at damage control was, let's just say, not her best moment. With a straight face, she told reporters, "The entire cabinet is now collectively taking on Elon's responsibilities." Honestly, if the goal was to make this exit sound less chaotic, the result was pretty much the opposite. The whole explanation came off like one of those group school projects where everyone promises they'll pick up the slack, but nobody actually does anything. It wasn't exactly reassuring. Now, let's rewind for a second. Musk wasn't just some random hire. Before his controversial time as a senior advisor, he was a top donor and a loud and proud supporter of the administration. Big money, big influence. He was one of the big guns, but his tenure quickly turned into one of those uh-oh moments where everyone starts questioning why this guy was even given a seat at the table to begin with. His polarizing reputation, equal parts visionary and loose cannon, didn't exactly help. And then he pulled the plug, stepping down in a move that felt like him saying, "You know what? I've tested my limits here, and I'm done." Leavitt's spin was almost comical. Saying the cabinet could collectively do Musk's job wasn't just a stretch, it was basically a spotlight on how little direction there was. Musk's aura, call it swagger, self-assuredness, whatever, might have been over the top, but compared to this mess, it was at least something clear to latch onto. Post-Musk, what we were left with was more, well, fog. Not a bold plan, not even a coherent one. Just a government trying to make it sound like they had their act together while tripping over their shoelaces in front of the press. But Musk wasn't the only headache of the day. The presser quickly veered into the complicated world of tariffs. It's a subject that usually makes people's eyes glaze over, but this situation was spicy enough to keep everyone's attention. Turns out Trump's tariff policies just got slammed by the US Court of International Trade, which ruled that he had exceeded his authority when imposing them. Slapping a bunch of taxes on goods, sure, that's one way to act tough, unless of course you're overstepping the law to do it. The court wasn't subtle about its ruling either. They told the administration they had 10 days to remove almost all the tariffs. 10 days! That's practically no time at all in government terms. But even with this firm order, the White House was standing firm, refusing to back down. In fact, they immediately appealed. Why? According to the administration's legal team, removing the tariffs would kneecap the president on the world stage. Strong words, but they also kind of highlight the shaky logic here. If these tariffs were such a solid move for the economy, why are they creating so much legal and financial instability? Leavitt's defense of the tariffs went about as well as anyone could have guessed, by which I mean it was a complete car crash. She tried to claim that other nations still had faith in Trump's approach, despite the clear court rulings against him. Other nations faithful to Trump's tariffs. That statement probably raised more eyebrows than any financial summary ever could. It was like saying you've got a 5-star Yelp review from the guy who just closed his business and emptied the register. The legal challenges aren't even the full picture here. These tariffs have basically thrown the economy into a blender. One economist even called Trump's trade methods madness. Investors didn't sugarcoat things either. They started demanding higher yields as compensation for the chaos, which is finance speak for, we don't trust what's going on here. Combined with earlier stumbles over fake data and awkward pressers, it only painted an even grimmer picture of a government drowning in its own mixed messages. And speaking of pictures, these individual moments weren't just isolated slip-ups. They were pieces of a much larger, messier story. So how do all these chaotic threads tie together? What do Musk, tariffs, and a paltry health report say about this administration as a whole? That's where things really start making sense. Or at least more sense than Leavitt's explanations. Let's break it all down. The chaos of this week wasn't just a fluke. It was a greatest hits collection of every problem this administration has tried to outrun. From Karoline Leavitt yelling, "Press out," as reporters scrambled, to the embarrassing discovery of fake data in the MA report, it's clear the wheels are coming off. Even former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers had to chime in, sarcastically saying, "Good luck to you and your viewers in this challenging time. It's not just one bad day, it's a pattern of mismanagement. And if this week proved anything, it's that their grip on control is slipping fast." Stay tuned.